Hi, I'm Effie, and in this video I'm going to be running through my top 10 most disappointing books of 2024. This list is in ranked order, so from least most disappointing to most disappointing. I hope that makes sense. And I don't have much else in the way of intro, so let's just jump straight in. So in the number 10 spot we have Panic by Luke Jennings. The reason this makes this list is because I loved the Killing Eve books. Like, I really enjoyed them. So when I saw that Luke Jennings had another book, I was really excited to read it and hope that it would have the same magic. And I mean, this is not a terrible book by any stretch of the imagination, but it just isn't on a level with Killing Eve. Although that said, maybe my memory of the Killing Eve books is flawed, and if I was to read them today I wouldn't have the same experience. But for my recollection, it's just not on the same level, unfortunately. And my number 9 spot is very much the same situation, in that it's Imposter Syndrome by Joseph Knox. I really enjoyed True Crime Story. It was full of lots of twists and turns, and I think the format felt very intriguing and unique. And it's a little bit different with this one because Joseph Knox has written other books beyond True Crime Story, but I was hoping for a book that had that same magic. And again, it's not an inherently bad book, but it's nowhere near on the same level as True Crime Story, which is a book I still think about and still have incredibly fond memories of. But that's not to say Imposter Syndrome isn't a really smart book. It just isn't quite on the same level. How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin makes this list because half of it's good. So How to Solve Your Own Murder, as the name might suggest, involves a woman who predicts that she has been murdered, and then as part of the distribution of her assets after she dies, she tasks this group of people with discovering who murdered her. And the reason she had this lasting belief that she was going to be murdered is that as a teen, she visited a fortune teller who told her that this was going to happen in a somewhat cryptic way. So this book is told in dual timeline, where we have the past timeline where she receives this fortune, and then we have the present timeline where she has been murdered. And I just thought the past timeline didn't work. I think there was some confusion around the chronology. I don't know if that was just me and I just didn't read it properly, or if the chronology was a bit off. If I remember correctly, the dates aren't explicitly mentioned in the past timeline, and there's a very deliberate reason why that's the case. But it meant that I ended up being very confused by the order of events and how things were possible to have happened. I thought the present timeline was great. I didn't see the resolution coming. I didn't see who'd done it, but I just did not enjoy the past timeline at all. I didn't think it worked particularly well in this book. Dark Stranger the Dream by I.T. Lucas I picked up for a very specific reason. I was looking for a book that had the same kind of magic as Dark Lover. And I think the problem with this book is it was very much like, can I copy your homework? Yeah, but don't make it too obvious. Except it was pretty obvious. Like, it very much felt like this author had gone, okay, let's basically write Dark Lover, but instead of them being vampires, they are descendants of gods that happen to drink blood and are immortal. And it just didn't really work, because Dark Lover I'd not long read before this book, and it worked so well for me So for this to not hit and for this to just be kind of copying its homework, I also thought that, you know, sometimes when you're reading a series and it very much feels like the author's kind of dragging it out and the book could be a lot tighter, it probably didn't need to be a series, or at least some of the books could have been squidged together a bit. That's what this book felt like. It spent a lot of time establishing this potential relationship, and then you never got the satisfaction of these characters coming together. And I just don't want to continue the series, and likely won't be continuing the series, so I'll never get that satisfaction. Gothic Grove by J.A. George had a lot of promise. It's vampires, but the vampires are kind of the bad guys. There's also witches, I think there's dragons, and I think like a princess of hell or something. I probably will actually be continuing this series, but this was one of those books where the balance between spice and plot was off, in my opinion. I thought too much time was spent on the bedroom scenes when there was an intriguing fantasy plot that I was much more interested in getting to. And it just overall didn't work for me because of that reason. Like, I wanted a lot more satisfaction on the fantasy front, and what I got were a lot of scenes of these characters in bedrooms together. The Velveteen Rabbit by Marjorie Williams Bianco. Yeah, this was the first time I had read this book, and I think my disappointment largely came from the fact that I feel like for years I've been hearing that this book is utterly devastating, and then I read it and went, oh, is that it? I don't think that's particularly sad. And it made me feel really cold and heartless, but I just didn't get the emotional gut punch that I was expecting from this book. And yeah, that's basically the sum total of it. I'm realising once again I haven't told you what any of these books are. I sincerely apologise. But also, I don't recommend any of them. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I do recommend Panic and Imposter Syndrome, but the rest of them, less so. The Locked Coffin by Lavi Tada, I guess is more technically a short story, but it gets put on here. So this is a locked room murder mystery where the investigator is a vampire, and my issue with this book was a pacing one. It took a long time to establish this locked room murder mystery, and then it was like bang, 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 and I didn't have the time to breathe and take in the information that we were being told, to the point that, wait, no, I think I do know who the murderer was, because it wasn't anyone. It would make sense if you read it, but we just got so much information in such a short period of time that I just didn't have the time to process it, and it left me severely disappointed. Alpha Ruined by Liliana Carlyle, I picked up because this is so stupid. I'd seen a video advertised, like I think it was like a TikTok. I don't know if it was even from the author herself, but basically saying that the love interest breaks into the FMC's house and leaves her a fridge full of expensive cheese. And that had me intrigued. But I think the reason I ended up most disappointed with this was, one, when you go to read this book, it recommends that you read Alpha Inmate first to get like the full scope of the story. And then also, it just wasn't a very good book. So in my opinion, if you're going to read Alpha Ruined and Alpha Inmate, you read them the other way around. You read Alpha Ruined first and then you read Alpha Inmate, because the core principle of this story is that our FMC is a reporter and she's investigating the events surrounding what happened in Alpha Inmate. So going into this book, already knowing what happened in Alpha Inmate ruined the experience for me, because I already knew it all. I already knew the mystery she's trying to uncover. And then, like, it's fine. They're very, like, bog standard Omegaverse sort of books. Like, they're not particularly good Omegaverse books, and, you know, some of the things that can make people uncomfortable about Omegaverse books are present in these books, but also is very tropey and stuff. They're, you know, they're fine as they are. It just didn't quite hit. And as I say, part of that was that because I'd read Alpha Inmate first and already knew the mystery, it took the excitement away for me. And then also, he didn't break in anywhere near enough and fill her fridge with cheese. I needed at least 3 more scenes of him just leaving cheese for her, because it was fun. Whistle by E. Lockhart is a DC comic, and it's around the superhero of Whistle. And my disappointment, and I went back and read the little kind of introduction to this graphic novel, because I'd first read a little taster of it in Catwoman Soul Stealer, and I was like, oh, I'm interested. I went back and I read it and I was like, oh, okay, I can see how I got my interpretation wrong, and I can see how the story we got is obviously the story in front of me. But I went into this graphic novel expecting something that was a lot more involving the Riddler. And whilst the Riddler is a fairly significant character in this story, it's not really the point. Like, this is, I think the superhero is called Whistle, and she's one of the lamest superheroes I've ever come across. Like, she can whistle and call dogs or something stupid like that. So I did not enjoy that aspect. And then there was another thing where they de-queered Poison Ivy. Like, Poison Ivy is meant to be with Catwoman? No, Harley Quinn? Is it Harley Quinn, I think? Poison Ivy's meant to be with. But the law in this was that she couldn't touch anyone. And I was like, no, don't take away queer characters. They're few and far between, it seems like, in superhero comics and whatnot. Don't do that to us. Did not appreciate. And then the most disappointing, I have put Bonded by Thorns on the list, but quite honestly, just the whole Beasts of the Briar series. And I'm hoping that I've chaptered this video, because in order to fully talk about these books, I'm going to have to get slightly spoilery. So hopefully I've chaptered it and you can jump to the outro. But yeah, let's dive into the Beasts of the Briar. I'm like rolling up my sleeves to get talking about these, because, oh, this series, like, I'm finding them really, like, I can't stop reading them, even though I hate them. But yeah, let's get into it. So essentially, we have this woman who ends up in the world of the Fae, and basically it's a Beauty and the Beast kind of story. So you've got the high princes of the 4 seasonal courts of this land of the Fae that have been cursed, and they've even got roses and stuff, to take on beast forms every night until they find their mate. And this is on the blurb of book 1. It basically says all 4 of these men are her mate. So you go into it expecting it to be why choose reverse harem, whatever word they're choosing for this series. That's the expectation when you pick up these books. And, like, technically that's the case, but, and this is the other thing, you can tell from each of the covers which of them she mates with. I don't know why I'm inverted commas. She has sex with them. Well, that's a whole other thing that I'll get into in a sec. But, like, she's doing stuff with them, like, all the time. But certain things have to be met so that she can like activate the mate bond or whatever. And based on the cover, you know which one it's going to be by what the cover looks like. So my problem is that it's one per book, or at least that's been the formula so far. I've not finished the 4th book, but it seems to be that it's one of them per book. So that's the first issue, is that the pacing's completely off, especially when the blurb for book 1 tells you that all 4 of these men are her mates. Like, I would much rather that she kind of found out that all of these men were her mates and had the mate bond much earlier on in the story. I think if you're going to put on the blurb of book 1, it needs to be satisfied in book 1, because otherwise you are setting the reader up with incorrect expectations. Because why are you telling me up front all 4 of these men are her mates when, you know, 3.5 books later, which is roughly where I'm at, she's still not mates with all 4 of them. And in fact, the mate bond hasn't even been satisfied, because I mean, the lore around it is a bit weird, because sometimes it's like, oh, they just need to have sex, but then also they need to like accept it, and oh, but actually it's to do with pleasure, and just like, just make your bloody mind up. Apparently I ran out of storage and didn't realise. So I don't know where my rant I was up to, but essentially I think I've said already in this video before, but I don't mind like levels of spice and stuff, except when it bogs down the plot. And that's what we ended up happening. It ended up taking away from this rather intriguing fantasy plot to just have sex scenes. And then there was this whole thing, right? And it takes about 1,000 pages for this to happen, which is ridiculous. But essentially, it, I guess, is something to do with the mate bonds and not wanting to trigger the mate bonds or something. But like, not the characters not wanting to trigger the mate bonds, but like the authors not wanting the mate bonds to get triggered. Because what ends up happening is our FMC keeps trying to initiate sexual, like, P&V with each of our male characters, and stupid stuff keeps happening. Stupid stuff keeps getting in the way, so she doesn't get P&V, and this goes on for like 1,000 pages. I mean, across like book 1 into a ridiculous chunk of book 2, and it just got really irritating, because you knew that every time she would start to do something stupid would stop her, and it was so repetitive. And I was like, can you not? Just, can you not? And I think part of it is that it's not really fully established what can trigger the mate bonds, but the authors, I guess, have in their head what can trigger it, and they've decided that this is something that can trigger it or something. I don't know, but it needs to stop. And yeah, I'm just irritated that, you know, the mate bonds haven't been triggered yet. And also at this point, I don't like some of the characters for her, but that's a whole other issue. So what else? Oh yeah, in Bonded by Thorns, we have 2 of the male Fae characters they're not really in a relationship, or at least they don't say they're in a relationship, but they kind of are. They just haven't put that label on it. And kind of the first time you see, well, it's P&A because of the equipment these 2 characters have, but the first time you see penetrative sex, I suppose is the best way to describe it, is these 2 characters being together, which, fantastic. We love to see diverse queer narratives. The problem is, this is exactly what the gay community hates about MM, because this scene is written through the eyes of our FMC purely for the titillation of our FMC, and by extension the reader. So it made me deeply uncomfortable, because this is a scene between 2 loving participants, but it's not about them. It's about the FMC getting excited. about watching them. Oh gosh, what else? What else? I have so many issues with this series. Like, it's so bogged down with the sex scenes when I just want to know about this engaging fantasy plot, and it just won't deliver to me. Also, like, my favourite character, I think we're not going to see. I mean, we're going full spoilers here, so actually there's 5 mates, and we're probably, like, following the formula we've had so far. We're probably not going to see that mate bond being activated until book 5, which is really disappointing because he is by far my favourite, and I just want to see her happy with him. And yeah, what else? Oh yeah, at the end of book 3, one of these fae males has found a mate bond with someone else, and then you find out this person is actually FMC's sister. She doesn't know she's got a sister, but I think this person knows she's her sister and she hates her. And I kind of like that he is not her mate, but then, like, in book 4, it very quickly, like, winds that back and goes, oh no, actually he is her mate, but they don't know it yet. And it's like, why are you telling me before the characters? Like, it's not working, because, oh gosh, I'm probably like close to 2,000 pages deep in this series, and like, so many things have not been revealed to the characters yet that, as the reader, you know practically from page 1. Okay, I'm gonna wind up this rant here because I probably could make a whole video about how much I despise these books and cannot seem to stop reading them. But just know this series was so disappointing to me because it had so much potential and it just will not live up to it. It just refuses to do the good thing with it. Sorry, it just makes me aggravated. Anyway, those were the 10 most disappointing books. Well, I guess it's technically more because of all the Beast of Briars books, but those were the 10 most disappointing books that I read in 2024. I would love to know what books you've read this year that have been a disappointment. But until next time, thank you for watching, thank you for listening to my ranting, and love you! Bye!